Hey, hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies both new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
This week, Helen Mirren and Ryan Reynolds are trying to gain proper ownership for The Woman in Gold. A young couple takes the longest ride in the latest Nicholas Sparks adaptation. Al Pacino is an aging singer trying to right his mistakes in Danny Collins. And we see Ryan Reynolds again in our home media moment, The Captive. As such, our top five this week is our favorite Reynolds performances. And our triple feature of older films is new classic Olympus Has Fallen, Justin's pick for old classic Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist, and Oscar-nominated film Atonement. First up, though, we have The Woman in Gold, and Joe's going to tell us about that.
This film is based on a true story of the late Maria Altman, played by Helen Mirren, who is an elderly Jewish refugee living in Los Angeles in the late 90s, who, together with a young lawyer who is a friend of a relative, E. Randall Schoenberg, played by Ryan Reynolds, who fought the government of Austria for almost a decade to reclaim Gustav Klimt's iconic painting of her aunt, the portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer I, which was confiscated from her relatives by the Nazis in Vienna just prior to World War II. Now, this story covers some pretty basic ground, uplifted mostly, I think, by Mirren's performance, because she always does a pretty good job. But I think too much time is spent on the more modern storyline throughout the beginning of the movie, which just isn't that compelling. And the historical stuff is more interesting, but like I've said, we've seen it done before in better films. Still, Reynolds does an okay job, though I think he emotes a little too much at some points. It's a little less believable. It's just not his best acting. Still, the story isn't really that bad. And there is a scene that's really, really touching towards the end, which kind of uplifts the movie for me. But I can't really put it much higher than that, especially since I learned from this film that Guardians of the Galaxy apparently came out in 1998.
Wait, what? I missed this.
Well,
was there a billboard or something in it?
It's really bad. Like, they're driving, I mean, I know it's Los Angeles, but they're driving right in the center, and in this huge billboard right to the left, it's Guardians of the Galaxy.
No kidding.
I normally do not.
I missed it.
I normally don't care about stuff like that, but that was just so bad. I was like, I don't know. That was a really lazy shot. But stuff like that obviously wasn't that clean put together, but there were some genuinely good things here. Overall, it just kind of averages out as decent. I leave it with a B-.
You know what's interesting about that, though, is how easy would that have been just to CGI out?
I was going to say.
Put anything up.
Really easy edit.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, just
wow.
It was such an obvious error, because it's not like it was something you had to look for. It was a huge billboard, like pretty much dead on as they're driving.
Did you notice that, Justin? I totally missed it.
I think I caught a glimpse of it at one point, but...
I mean, the thing is, they held on it for a good couple seconds, and I was just like, wow.
Wow.
I mean, and I'm just thinking 1998, and then like almost immediately there's that. It just took me right out of the movie.
Mm-hmm. I
And
bet.
Like I said, I normally don't notice things like that. That was just lazy editing, I thought. Like, it seemed like people were just trying to rush through it, and that's how it felt like for the rest of the movie. But like I said, some of the historical aspects were really good. Like towards the end, there's this great scene that just is so emotional. Most of it's been done before, better. So that was my thoughts on Woman in Gold.
Well, I thought it was interesting, actually, that we just did Philomena for New Classic a few weeks ago.
Very similar.
Because, yeah, at its very base, this movie has a lot of similarities with that. The senior citizen woman goes on a road trip with the younger man in search of justice. Both are based on true events. You know, obviously the story's sort of part ways there, but it is hard not to draw comparisons with those characters and the tone of that film. The chemistry between Reynolds and Mirren is okay, but, you know, cannot compare to Coogan and Dench, obviously.
Not even close.
And you were sort of hinting at this, Joe, that I feel like Reynolds strains a little too much in some of his characters' more dramatic moments.
Like, the one part where he's going through this arc where he just feels so touched by everything when he went over there.
In the restroom.
And I'm just, yes,
right?
and it just like, I'm like, I know this scene is supposed to be powerful, but I just feel like he's overacting a little bit.
Was.
I'm just like, that, it just came off as too cheesy to me.
I also wish Daniel Bruhl had more screen time. I thought he was really good.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't know that his character needed to be in it more, but I wanted to see more of him. I thought the flashback scenes were interesting to a point. Luckily, they do use them sparingly because, like you say, Joe, I mean, we've seen that over and over again. The most interesting one for me in the flashback was the real long one, smack dab in the middle of the movie. I could have done maybe with just that one and then the ones that bookended the story.
That would have helped.
Yeah, I don't think we needed to keep going back to that well, but... Mirren obviously gives a firecracker performance as always. Her accent, spot on. I give it a B-. Justin?
Well, The Woman in Gold is one of these films that honestly has one person holding the movie up for the most part, which, of course, is Helen Mirren. And to some varying extents, Daniel Bruhl, even though he's only in it for a small portion. But really, this is Mirren's story through and through. But for me, it's one of those really fascinating stories that's just so squandered by really, really dry writing, and perhaps one of Reynolds' laziest performances. I thought he was phoning it in. I thought he couldn't even remotely keep up with Mirren. It was just pitiful to watch. I do gotta admit, it gets a little bit better as it goes along. We get closer to the courtroom finale. Some of the flashbacks were good. I thought it was a little strange that they were interspersed for the first half of the movie, and then we get to the big one that you mentioned, Dan, and then we never see anything else. I thought that was really strange.
It was kind of awkward, yeah.
We saw a little bit more, but
a smidge.
Yeah, not as much as the first half, for sure.
But honestly, it does start to come together a little bit better until we get to the ending, which is just beyond cheesy. I leave it with a C+.
I really liked the ending. That's probably what held it up for me.
I loathed the ending. I was eye-rolling the entire time that was on.
I don't know. I kind of liked that. I thought it was a good culmination for her. What do you think, Dan?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I actually did like the ending.
Right, it was actually one of my favorite parts.
Such a Titanic ripoff.
You mean like a ripoff of something else that's big, or from the movie Titanic?
Look at all the things that were part of my past that are coming to life again that have been taken from me. No, this is cheesy and doesn't need to be there.
I thought it worked.
It didn't remind me of Titanic at all. But I did want to see more of the courtroom.
Yeah.
As always. I mean, I think, you know.
You even said it yourself, Joe. It was a decades-long courtroom battle. It's like, here it's more like a highlight reel.
Well, that's also one of the issues with the movie, is that within the 90s storyline, the time jumping is kind of difficult because it's literally like, I know that that's what actually happened, but I feel like there had to have been something to kind of make it a little more fluid, because it was like 4 months later, 6 months later, 9 months later, and between the flashbacks, sometimes I'm like, okay, well, so nothing just happened in this time? Like, I don't know.
I really just wanted to see more, mainly with the Supreme Court, because we only get one scene of that, and I thought that was really interesting.
Well, one of the problems, too, is that they kind of make it seem like it's less of a battle in some ways, because they kind of almost hint like, ha, 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 oh,
these guys always got one up over them.
Basically, and it just seems like even when they get to the Supreme Court, like even the justices are kind of laughing like they're almost on her side anyway.
Right.
It's just that much of a struggle. I don't know. It was almost kind of like trying to be quirky, like, oh, side with the old lady, because she's so charming. So I think that kind of took some of the punch out of it.
Yeah. I don't agree, though, Justin, that Reynolds is phoning it in here. I think.
Oh my gosh!
I think Joe and I are of the position that he's trying too hard. I don't think he's phoning it in. I think he's trying a little too hard.
I don't know if it's necessarily all him. I think it might be a directorial issue too, because it's like,
I think it's just the fact that they didn't give his character anything to do. It's an incredibly weak character that I get that he's trying to play up this whole like out of his element lawyer who sort of rises through the ranks over the course of the storyline, but he's just so blatantly one note from Reynolds' performance. It's lazy. The reason the first hour is such a struggle to get through for me was the fact that it focused so heavily on Reynolds.
I kind of liked the sort of out of his luck lawyer kind of learning things, and I thought he played that well because it's closer to what Reynolds' character typically is. I mean, really, it's a lot closer to what he typically does, which is what I'm used to, so I like that. When he tried to be really dramatic in those more emotional scenes, that's where it was iffy. I can't be honest.
Every time,
those were kind of bad. I'll be honest, but I thought where he was more in his comfort zone, just playing this awkward guy with the snips. That's really pretty much typical Reynolds. I can't really say that was bad. I mean, that's what he does. So
I don't know. I mean, they're trying to make us get behind this character, and he just cannot pull it off.
He pulled off some of it, I think.
Yeah, I thought he was all right. I just thought in those dramatic moments, it was too over the top.
I can't really say.
I'm sorry, gentlemen. Mirren has him for lunch.
Well, no kidding. She's Helen Mirren.
I mean, that's not really a fair comparison, I think. It's really not.
It's not.
But
like you said in your review, Justin, it's her story.
It is her story.
So, he doesn't need to necessarily go nose to nose with her.
No, but you got to have somebody who's at least able to keep up. Reynolds doesn't even come remotely close.
I think you're being a little too hard on Reynolds because, as you said, it's a one-note character from the writing. They don't really give him much of an arc.
Yes, but still a decent actor knows how to make that work.
And I think some elements of the character he did. I just think that the handling of his character's arc, it's not necessarily just the acting. He plays basically this one character throughout most of the first two acts, and then as he goes over to Europe and he has this huge revelation, he has this arc, and it's such a huge jump. That's what's badly written. And then those acting, it's kind of hard to jump from that. So is it definitely some bad acting there? Yes, it's rough.
It's probably about 50-50 in all honesty.
That's what I'm saying.
It's still not a good performance.
It's not a very good performance, but I thought it was okay.
Yeah, I thought it was an alright performance.
It's a passable performance.
Yeah.
You know.
No one mentioned Katie Holmes and how horrible she is, but
she sucks. And
she always sucks.
And if you want to talk about a one-note character that you can take out of the movie,
his entire wife subplot, yes.
I'm just saying, really, every scene she was in,
useless.
So that's...
Listen, I'm not going to lie. We don't see her for like a good maybe half hour, 40 minutes. When we come back to her, I forgot she was in the movie, and I gasped out loud. I was like, ugh, this again. Because I dislike her so much. But yes, her character as well was pointless. All right, well, up next we've got The Longest Ride. And this is the 10th original film adaptation of a popular Nicholas Sparks novel, and in it, Scott Eastwood, that's Clint Eastwood's son, stars as bull rider Luke Collins, who meets a female fan named Sophia, played by Britt Robertson, and the two start a courtship. On their first date, they see a car crash and help the old man behind the wheel to safety, named Ira, played by Alan Alda. Now, as Ira's laid up in the hospital, the two visit him, and he tells them of his courtship with his late wife as a young man, which has some parallels to their own romance. Last year's The Best of Me was one of the low points in the list of Sparks adaptations, so where does The Longest Ride fall? It is somewhere towards the middle. The young performances are a bit more wooden than some others, but these actors are also not as seasoned as a Zac Efron or Ryan Gosling. They get the job done, even with some of the cornier moments, which we've come to expect from these kind of adaptations. By comparison, though, Alda spends most of the time in the hospital bed and still outacts everyone in the room, as always.
That's to be expected, yeah.
Yeah, and as with most Sparks stories, the current and flashback romances dovetail with mixed results. The twist at the end isn't necessarily earth-shattering, but I think it puts a tidy cap on the story overall. If you can't tell, I'm not really overly enthused with this movie, but it also isn't terrible. I'll give it a C. Justin?
Just as with last year's The Best of Me, it feels almost pointless trying to expect anything out of Sparks-related films, but this is easily one of the most pitiful installments yet. This honestly feels like Nicholas Sparks just decided his latest formulaic story wasn't exactly working, so he decided to find a way to sneak in another story so that one can take more center stage, and hopefully people will just enjoy the other one in little bits and pieces. It wouldn't be so bad if Robertson and Eastwood had any degree of chemistry whatsoever. They don't. And it ruins almost every single scene that they're in. That's not to say that the flashback scenes are much better, but honestly, I could at least sort of get behind this for about 80% of this movie until this ridiculous plot device gets inserted in the last 10 to 15 minutes of the movie that just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. It's ridiculous, it's bizarre, and they just expect audiences to run with it because it's Nicholas Sparks, and he's apparently allowed to get away with this. This isn't quite as bad as Safe Haven or my least favorite of all time, Dear John, but it's certainly not a good movie. I leave The Longest Ride with a D.
But see, this is the problem. If you give them all horrible grades, then how do we determine which ones are okay? I mean, the audience polling coming out of this movie is an A. So obviously it's working wonders for its target audience.
I was willing to give it a D+ up until that moment.
That's still not that much better, though.
It's not.
You know,
but here's the thing. They all have variations on grades. Best of Me got a C-. Safe Haven got a D-.
I think this is better than The Best of Me.
What do you give The Notebook?
Notebook was probably B+. I never saw Message in a Bottle. I'll be the first to
Yeah, I didn't either, actually.
You get my drift. They aren't all the same level of mediocrity, is my point.
I guess not, but the last four certainly seem to be.
Well, I mean,
all the ones you mentioned in your review are the most recent ones. Safe Haven. Dear John, I guess there was Lucky One in between there, but still, Lucky One wasn't
Lucky One I thought was okay.
Yeah, it was alright. I think I gave that a C as well. I'll admit that the current couple, the Eastwood and Robertson, they don't have a ton of chemistry. Their storyline was the most useless, I guess you could say. But I liked the flashback storyline, and I did like the Alan Alda hospital storyline.
Oh, Alan Alda's great, as we said.
Yeah, but his storyline involves the two of them. I can't say they have much chemistry with each other, like you said, but I do think that they're not horrible actors.
Robertson significantly more than Eastwood, but yes.
Well, yeah, that's true. But his character also doesn't need to do that much.
No,
his role as dumb cowboy.
Yeah,
so
which is a whole problem in and of itself.
We should say that Joe has not seen this. We're not ignoring him and not letting him review.
I think you're right. You got to look at a movie like this from its target audience. I mean, what do they expect? You said, well, people are liking it?
Yeah, the cinema score on the movie, which is when they do the polling on opening night. So obviously it's, people that are interested in the movie to begin with, but they gave it an A. And that, to me, says that it is hitting the right notes for its audience.
Well, that's something.
Do I think it's a cinematic masterpiece? Obviously not.
Well,
I think D is a little harsh for what this movie is setting out to do.
There was a question, because I know Justin was thinking about it. You mentioned that you thought that the dovetailing between the two storylines didn't work out too well. Or is that the comparison with World War II versus bull riding?
World War II isn't as much a part of it as the trailers would have you believe.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, then what exactly would be the comparison?
Well, what I meant by that was that pretty much all Sparks adaptations have this dovetailing with the current and the past stories, and they always have mixed results. Some better than others. Like in this, I liked the past story better than the current, whereas Best of Me, I thought they were kind of on par with each other, and each one had
moments.
Had moments of good and a lot of moments of bad also. Through this film, it's pretty consistent, but just Sparks adaptations in general, just over the course of history, have been mixed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an accurate statement. Some work better than others. Some also make it a bigger deal than others as well, which is a whole new mess.
I think it was smart maybe not to spend too much on the current characters here. I do have to say, I don't know that it needs to be as long as it is, but I didn't find it boring at all.
Oh my gosh.
I know, I'm sure you did. I'm saying for me, I didn't think it was overly long. It doesn't need to be as long as it is, but
I basically looked at the time 4 minutes in and said, this is going to be a long movie.
Well, see, that's a preconceived problem, though. 4 minutes in, if you're looking at the time, you're setting yourself up to think that it's a long movie.
Or just coming to the conclusion that it's going to be an incredibly boring and tedious movie.
To be fair, though, usually if you're watching 4 minutes of a movie and it's boring you, that's probably a bad sign.
Yeah, that's true. But, I mean, knowing going into it that it is over 2 hours, I'm sure that doesn't help.
No, I'm not denying that. I'm just thinking, if you're going to make a movie that long, have some degree of focus. Make stuff happen. Don't just put in every single Nicholas Sparks cliche in the book over the course of this time period.
All right, up next we've got Danny Collins, and Justin, you're going to tell us about that.
For years, aging has-been rock musician Danny Collins, played by Al Pacino, has been performing his hits for his devoted fans. However, when he receives a letter written to him by the legendary John Lennon, Collins tries to change his lifestyle by reconnecting with his estranged son, played by Bobby Cannavale, and his pregnant wife, played by Jennifer Garner. Lennon's letter reads in one section, "So what do you think about that, Danny Collins?" What do I think? The storyline's a little too familiar, but the weak spot is far and away Pacino's lackluster singing ability. They're trying to pass him off as this incredibly talented musician that has this uncanny singing voice and this ability to write these fantastic songs, and the result is just painful and just not even that catchy. Why they seem to believe that this character would have stood the test of time in the music scene is far and away beyond me. But the biggest issue with this is it makes the character seem less believable. But fortunately, when they go away from that and choose to focus on the family dynamic, it does have some legitimately interesting scenes talking about current disability services, where they stand with that, how is he reconnecting with his family, until the third act where it gets a little messy. But overall, I think it's an okay movie. I leave it with a C+.
Well, I feel there's a lot of moving parts to this story, and not all of them know where they're supposed to fit. The story with Danny's son is the most appealing. I love his dynamic with his manager, Possibly my favorite scene of the whole movie is when those two, Conoval and Christopher Plummer, have a moment together at the end. The humor mostly falls completely flat, and though I do like the Collins character, one of my biggest issues of the entire film is how his career makes zero sense in the real world. And I'm not even specifically talking about the stuff you were mentioning, Justin, because Tom Jones doesn't really have a great voice either. A lot of classic 60s, 70s, singers like this don't necessarily have great voices. They're more showmen. But my problem with it was they seem to play him off as this one-hit wonder. He has this one big song, Hey Baby Doll, yet somehow the big billboard that he's touring for is for his third greatest hits album. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how his career has spanned 30 years and kept afloat if he supposedly only has one song, which he makes no money off of because they say how he sold his publishing rights. It's just, that whole aspect just made no sense to me and really bothered me. But overall, I did think there were some decent performances, a solid storyline, especially with his family. It's enough to keep it barely afloat. I also give it a C+. Joe?
I believe he was active for about 10 years, and he had some other albums that he made. He just wrote some of his other stuff earlier, and then I guess more stuff with the studios later on.
They only let him perform one song, which is a little strange.
Right, everyone's hollering for one song at the concert, and that made no sense to me.
Well, a lot of bands have one big song, and they only showed you one song in the concert that they showed you in the one scene. Do you want them to show you the entire studio concert?
I don't, but in his big, comeback concert at the small club, everyone was shouting for one song. If you go see the Stones, yeah, you get a lot of satisfaction, but you also get people screaming for Ruby Tuesday and, 18 other songs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure enough.
So yeah, I guess that might have touched the believability a little bit. Yeah, I think there's definitely some tonal issues with this one. The story does have a lot of directions it wants to go. I think the strongest thing is that Danny Collins is a very likable character, and I think he has some really good dynamic with Annette Bening's character in the hotel, and I think there was a lot of fun stuff there with the other employees in the hotel, and I really liked his dynamic with his family. I think that's definitely the strongest part of the movie, and I think it leads to a pretty good conclusion. I leave it with a B.
I do like Danny as a character. I'm not sure this movie knew what to do with him outside of the family aspect.
Yeah.
Did you like the family aspect? Because you didn't really touch on your favorite part.
I was okay with the family aspect. I wasn't okay with the pop star aspect trying to come into it, which was basically oil and water to me.
It was just the whole dynamic of this guy's living this rock star life, and he has to try to come in and readjust when he's completely out of his element. So that's actually a pretty good metaphor. It's not supposed to easily go back in. As the film continues to progress, we see that it is difficult as well.
That's not necessarily what I'm saying. I'm saying, later on in the story, he tries to sort of gel the two, and it just goes in this very strange and pretty much negates everything up to that point for no reason than he's in love with the legacy that he has. I don't know.
Well, I think it was just a matter of him trying to do something and getting nervous, honestly.
Yeah.
Because it was...
especially when people from his past came and entered the fray there.
I think there was a lot going on. And I actually did like that other storyline where he's trying to reinvent himself. I don't think it was as well developed as the family stuff.
No.
But I liked what they were trying to do with it. And I disagree. I actually kind of liked his voice. It wasn't that great, but I didn't hate it. I don't think it was the worst thing ever. Yeah. I mean, you're right. Is it oh God, he's the best thing? But he's 70. So
I think a lot of the singers of that era don't have great voices. Paul McCartney has a great voice.
Oh, yeah.
Mick Jagger, he's okay. He's a good showman, and he can write a good song.
Honestly, most rock singers, a lot of them are particularly great singers, technically.
Right. So I sort of gave him a pass on that.
I liked the song idea, but I wish they would have gone further with it. You see the beginning of it, and I thought there was some good potential there.
I didn't love the Annette Bening stuff. I thought it was okay, but they seemed to think they had this great patter back and forth.
I
thought it was okay. Really. He's clearly a charming guy and a charming character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I appreciated that he wasn't going to give up on this dinner with her idea, and I appreciate that she was sort of playing into it and going along with it. I don't know what my issue with it was. Maybe I didn't like their chemistry. Maybe I didn't like the dialogue that was written for them.
I wish their chemistry had been more compelling. I'll give you that one.
I think you guys missed the sarcasm.
Yeah, but there's still
It doesn't matter if he gets with her or not, really.
But it was still this big subplot that was going on for a good 10, 15 minutes of the movie. And they keep being like, oh, no, it's not going anywhere. But it is going somewhere, but it's not.
The patter was them kind of acknowledging it. Their patter wasn't that good. It was sarcastic. It was bad. He was corny.
It was bad.
But that was funny to her. That's why it's like, it's charming.
Yeah, I guess.
I could appreciate that.
I thought the other hotel staff was kind of wasted, too.
Yeah,
I thought there could have been something with that.
Yeah, I was curious, like, oh, he's going to pass on some sort of, like, degree of wisdom and sort of help this kid out. But nope, doesn't really go anywhere. Yeah. Sort of a lost opportunity. But
it's not entirely true.
They could have done more, is my point.
They could have done more, but I think it was resolved enough.
I think the best scenes of the movie are, honestly, anything that Bobby Cannavale was in. I liked his solo scenes with Pacino, and I liked that scene at the end with Plummer.
It was a good scene.
Yeah. So he was one of my favorite characters, for sure. All right, well, let's move into our home media moment. We've got another Ryan Reynolds movie, and this is The Captive. Here, Reynolds plays Matthew, a father whose young daughter Cass, played by Alexia Fast, disappears when he stops to get her a pie after her sports practice one day. A police force is investigating the disappearance, led by Rosario Dawson and Scott Speedman, but they aren't moving fast enough for Matthew's taste, and also suspect that he might have had something to do with it, so he tries to tackle the situation himself some 8 years later. Muriel Enos plays Cass's mom, star of Sabotage.
Greatness.
It is directed and co-written by Adam Eoghan. The story smacks of parallels to 2013's Brilliant Prisoners, but the similarities pretty much stop with the story. The acting is worse, the mystery is virtually non-existent, and the tension is very forced. Setting it aside from Prisoners and taking it as its own film doesn't quite seem as bad as all that, but it still really isn't all that good. It's got kind of a strong opening, but continues to go down this bizarre thriller-esque road, but never actually thrills. The police are completely inept, the villain is kind of cartoonish. I give The Captive a C-. Joe.
I will say this. The one thing I actually did enjoy about this movie was I thought that Ryan Reynolds was actually doing a pretty good job playing a character that I don't typically see him play. I think he had some decent acting chops here. That's one of the few real positives I can say.
Okay.
I agree with you. It does have kind of a cool opening. I was thinking about Prisoners the whole time. Mm-hmm. I actually thought there was some tension when the girl is kidnapped. Like, you can really sense the desperation there. There's something. But then there's actually what's going on with the kidnapper and his weird plan, which, with the random time jumps, too. By the way, probably one of the laziest time jumps I've ever seen, because it's literally like, we're in one scene, we go to the next scene, and with no indication, nobody looks like they've changed, no makeup, anything.
Nope. It's like 8 years later.
It's like 6 years later they say, oh yeah, I haven't seen you in 6 years. Hold on a minute.
Right.
What the heck? And I just love how everybody is so unenthused. Like, oh yeah, daughter's missing 6 years. Oh, we found her. Hey, we found your daughter. What? It's like, oh yeah, she's on a picture on a website. What kind of picture? How many times do we have to say it over again? What do you think? Your daughter was kidnapped.
Right.
Oh my God. And the cops. Oh,
they're the worst.
They're truly terrible.
I mean, I know what they're trying to do, but they are interrogating Ryan Reynolds constantly. Like, hey, did you see your daughter? They say their daughter wasn't there. She could be laying in the back seat. Mm-hmm. You know, what do kids like lay down and take naps? She's like 10 years old. Do they do that? What? And this guy claims to be this detective,
this expert.
No.
In the field, yeah.
Oh my God, like those cops were the worst.
Yeah.
But there was just a lot of stupid, over the top stuff like that in this movie. I like it like a D+.
Justin?
Well, I'm glad I'm not the only one who saw the Prisoners parallels, because this movie desperately wants to capture that same sort of tension, but it's not Prisoners. Let's just be realistic here. The biggest issue, I think, with it is everybody looks completely and utterly bored, to the point that it's just draining to watch them deliver their lines. Even with the time jumps, it's like they don't care even when the main action happens. There's a couple interesting moments. There are some interesting moments that could have led to some great suspense, but then they just are so predictable and sloppy that you see it coming from a mile away. I called the twist about 20 minutes into the movie. I give it a D.
Reynolds' performance?
Probably one of his worst.
Really? Oh, wow, okay.
I don't know. I thought it was significantly better than some of his other ones I've seen.
Yeah, I think as far as dramatic performance from him, it was all right. I think I'm sort of in between you guys. I didn't love it.
It was a pretty good performance because I'm used to him seeing, well, as you see my list, it's going to be pretty consistent. He's playing Ryan Reynolds, so for him to see beyond that is an improvement for him.
Right,
I'm sorry, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's, stretching a little bit with this.
A little bit.
I mean, I like that. I liked some subtlety from him. It's pretty rare, you know.
Clearly he's trying to channel his inner Jackman, but it's just... he doesn't have the chops for it.
Yeah, everything in this movie is a blatant rip-off of Prisoners. So, I mean, I can't say that that's not true. But, again, when you take that movie and compare it with this one, Jackman is one good part of a good movie. Reynolds, I could say, is one okay part of a pretty bad movie. If you want to look at it like that.
Yeah.
Rosario Dawson certainly wasn't bringing it home.
Nah, she's...
and her character was just...
horrible.
Thank goodness for Daredevil, right?
The worst.
Yeah, she was good in Daredevil, so I watched her in that.
All right, well, since we're on the subject of Reynolds, why don't we move into the top 5? We're all sort of on the same page with The Captive. Justin, why don't we start with you on Ryan Reynolds' greatest performances, 5 through 2.
Oh, boy. Well, I wasn't kidding about I almost abstained from this one just because I was worried, but we got through it. So
why do you dislike Ryan Reynolds so much?
I just don't think it has that much range. It was kind of like the Wahlberg list. Number 5, Jerry, The Voices. This is one I know we're probably going to end up talking about later in much more depth, so I'll keep this one brief. I thought it was sort of like Reynolds' attempt at doing what Ryan Gosling did for Lars and the Real Girl, sort of play this guy that's very much out of his element, very reserved, and I thought he played it relatively well. Some parts rung truer than others, but it proved that he does have some comedic chops, as well as a willingness to explore some darker themes throughout the story. Number 4, Turbo, or Theo, Turbo. Now, this is by no means a great movie, but I do really like that Reynolds is willing to not only have fun with the role, but also really, really play off his supporting cast, particularly Paul Giamatti playing his brother. I mean, the story itself isn't great. It's pretty to be expected where it's heading, but he does have a lot of fun with it. And in that same vein, my number 3, Guy from The Croods. I feel like this is sort of Ryan Reynolds making fun of Ryan Reynolds, and honestly manages to get a couple decent jokes in, as well as also add some more complexity to his character later on. Much like Turbo, the story itself isn't wonderful, but it has its moments. And my number 2, Mike Connell, Adventureland. Not a really big part in this movie, but very, very memorable. Manages to play a complete jerk, but have a lot of fun with it, keeping the story lively, allowing tension to build, and also add some dimension to the bigger story of growing up in this setting.
All right, Joe, let's hear from you.
Number 5 for me. Well, actually, let me start off with an honorable mention. Guy from The Croods, I actually thought he was decent there. My number 5 is actually Turbo from Turbo. I actually kind of thought this movie was okay, and I thought his voice acting was good, as well as Giamatti. I do agree he played off him pretty well. Number 4 is Monty from Waiting. I love that movie. It's really stupid, but a lot of years in restaurants have made me appreciate it, and his character is gross, but he reminded me of a lot of experiences I've had, and I thought it was pretty entertaining there.
I've never seen that movie.
It's okay.
I don't like it.
Yeah, it's all
but
right.
People do.
It's a divisive comedy, but whatever. Number 3 is Matthew Piper from Captive. I actually thought this was him kind of stretching his roots and playing a more dramatic role, which I haven't seen too much of him. And number 2 is, pretty predictably, Wade Wilson from X-Men Origins Wolverine. He was pretty good. I don't know if he's like the best person ever to play the role. People are acting like he's born to play Deadpool, but he was pretty good, and he was my favorite part of that movie. So I guess that is something to be said.
I'm very surprised by that, given how much flack that movie got for introducing Deadpool in the way that they did.
Well, Justin, if you remember correctly, people liked the part where Ryan Reynolds was Deadpool. It's everything else that came afterwards.
Oh, okay. That's a fair statement.
So no, it's not Ryan Reynolds people were mad about. It was everything else. So you're not wrong. But the thing was, Ryan Reynolds is kind of the smart
Only
aleck.
had about 5 lines, but...
No, but he was the smart aleck with the mouth. He had a good scene. And then they did something you shouldn't do to Deadpool. They covered his mouth when he was revealed again. So Whatever.
Yeah, that's the most spoiler-free answer to that one.
All right, well, for my honorable mention, I actually chose between his two big animated performances, and I actually went with Guy from The Croods. I do like Turbo, well, not really the movie so much, but I do like his character in Turbo, but I really liked the way him and Emma Stone played off each other in The Croods. I thought they had really good chemistry there, and I do think he had some of the best lines of the movie. My number 5 is Chris Brander from Just Friends. I picked this as my quote-unquote early comedic lead performance, as you had Van Wilder, you have Waiting, which we know I don't like, and this one in Just Friends. The movie, all of these movies really are okay, I think, at best, but I thought Just Friends was very funny. I think he was able to flex his comedic chops a little bit better in that than in Van Wilder. Number 4, Joe, I'm not sure how you'll feel about this, is Hal Jordan from The Green Lantern. I'm one of the few people who does not hate the Green Lantern movie. I think I gave it a C+. But for whatever its faults were, I didn't think they were Ryan Reynolds' fault. Now, I don't know the comics at all, so maybe I'm way off base, but I thought he gave a good performance. Joe, you could speak to that.
I will speak to that. I actually agree with you. I would actually give him an honorable mention there.
Okay.
I mean, I don't like the Green Lantern movie, but Hal Jordan...
It wasn't his fault.
Ryan Reynolds played the character the way he typically is. Mm-hmm. So he was a pretty good fit. Was he the best actor for the role? No. That would be Nathan Fillion. But
okay, fair enough.
He was a decent stand-in.
I think you could say Nathan Fillion's probably the best actor for any role in a comic book type movie.
Yeah, that's probably accurate.
You know?
You could, actually. But, yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, my number 3 is Jerry Hickfang from The Voices. And as Justin said, we will be doing this in a home media moment probably in, a month and a half's time. It just got released on DVD and Blu-ray, so we'll be talking about that in due time. But this was a really interesting and new performance, I think, for Reynolds. First of all, he voices his pets in it and puts accents on, and we don't see him do that very often. And it's a very interesting movie. I think that's all I'll say about that for now. We'll tackle that later. My number 2 is Andrew Paxton from The Proposal. This, I think, is one of the best romantic comedies, at least in terms of straight-ahead romances. You've got your Silver Linings Playbook, which is a little more off the beaten path. But as far as a straight-ahead romantic comedy, The Proposal is one of the better ones, I think, in the last few years.
Who was his co-star in that movie?
Sandra Bullock. That's the one where she finds out she's, well, she doesn't find out she's Canadian, but her company finds out she's Canadian.
They're going to deport her.
And, they're going to deport her.
Yeah, I remember. Okay, I remember that.
Betty White's in it. It's a very funny movie, actually.
Gotcha.
And I think this was the first time I really saw him do anything other than sort of the
gross comedy,
frat boy, like Van Wilder type of comedy that we see in Just Friends and Waiting. So I thought he was stretching a bit there. And the chemistry between him and Sandra Bullock I thought was great. So that's my number 2. Justin?
You'll be happy to know that if I had had more time this week, I probably would have tried to watch that before this show.
You've never seen The Proposal?
I have never seen The Proposal.
Oh, it's really good. I don't know what you'd think of it, but I think it is pretty straightforward.
What I've seen, I liked.
Yeah, it's good.
But my number 1, I think it's pretty much to be expected, Paul Conroy, Buried. This was just a tour de force for Reynolds. I never thought much of him before this movie. After I watched this, I'm honestly curious to see if he'll ever turn out another performance this impressive. Really did a good job, built up a whole lot of tension in a very, very small amount of space, and got me completely on the edge of my seat. And just exploring it from the haunting conclusion continues to make me both frustrated and remorseful at the exact same time for his character in this movie. I'm really hoping that someday we get another performance like this. I think this definitely does show that the man has some degree of talent. It's just whether or not someone's willing to bring it out of him.
All right, Joe, how about for you?
Well, I know how much you guys love that movie, so I didn't watch it so that I knew that my list would be different. So, in all honesty, because I suspect that would probably be my number 1. Fair enough. So, my number 1 is Frank Allen from Chaos Theory.
Oh, I've never seen it.
Neither have I.
It's a very interesting movie, and I think he plays a very likable character with a really dynamic, interesting character study. So, yeah, very, very interesting movie, very unique, and it's my favorite movie with him in it so far. So,
drama, sci-fi, what is it?
Dark comedy.
Okay.
I've heard of it. I've never sat down and watched it, though.
It was on Instant a couple years ago. I randomly put it on, and I enjoyed it. This guy leaves a very well-ordered life, and then something really goes wrong out of his routine, and things start to spiral out of control, and it gets pretty ridiculous.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, my number one, as you might have guessed from Joe's description there, is Paul Conroy from Buried. This is interesting because critically, it's a pretty much universally accepted this is a great movie, but you talk to people, it is incredibly divisive. And for me, it's fantastic. I think what Reynolds does here in, like Justin said, this is very small amount of space is incredible. And really, there are so few actors, I think, that can carry a whole movie by themselves. Even, the examples that you might think of, Tom Hanks is alone a lot in Castaway, but he's not the whole movie. In Moon, Sam Rockwell, but then you've also got, the video monitors.
Yeah.
I mean, Ryan Reynolds is the only person in this whole movie. There's a couple of people on the telephone that have voice performances.
But you never see them.
You never see them. He is it, and he carries this whole movie on his back, and it's just an outstanding performance. So, certainly my number one. But Chaos Theory, very interesting. I may have to check that out because I am a Reynolds fan.
Yeah, it's decent. I'm not sure what you'll think about it, but I think it's a pretty good performance from him.
Cool. All right, well, Joe, we're going to go to you for the first of our triple feature films, and that is Olympus Has Fallen for our new classic.
You mean White House Down?
White House? No. No, that one doesn't count.
Well.
Based on our grades.
That's true. Olympus Has Fallen is a 2013 American action thriller film. It's directed by our favorite Antoine Fuqua, and it stars Gerard Butler, Aaron Eckhart, and Morgan Freeman, and I believe Angela Bassett was also here as well. Mm-hmm. Disgraced former presidential guard Mike Banning, played by Mr. Gerard Butler, finds himself trapped inside the White House in the wake of a terrorist attack by the Koreans, using his...
By the North Koreans, I'll have you know.
Specifically, the North Koreans, of course.
It typically is.
Well, the South Koreans typically don't attack us. It's always the North. Using his inside knowledge and experience, Banning works with the National Security to rescue the president, played by Aaron Eckhart, from his kidnappers. Now, I think this movie is over the top, but it works. You've got a good supporting cast, and Butler gives a decent performance for him, which is pretty rare, let's be honest. The action is tight, and it flows well, and works for some good, honest popcorn fun. I mean, it sets the stage right there with that over-the-top Aaron Eckhart yelling, "No!" you know you're in for some fun. I like this movie. I give it a B.
Okay. Justin?
Star power only means so much when a director such as Antoine Fuqua, who I will always argue is style over substance, isn't up to the task to direct the stars as well as they should. This isn't a movie that was meant to be spectacular, but I feel like Fuqua was trying to do something along the lines of having the fun of Die Hard, but also having the slickness of The Raid, and not meeting up to either of the criteria. It's fun, it's just not anything particularly special. I've seen many an action film that took the same formula and did it better. It's entertaining to watch. Butler does actually turn out a decent performance. There's the story remains engaging to some degree. Honestly, the less believable it gets later on is cringe-inducing, but overall, I think it's just a mixed bag that's enjoyable, but only that much. I leave it with a C+.
Okay, well, as far as derivative action movies go, you can definitely do a lot worse. Freeman and the rest of the cast are really having a ball here, and are better here than any movie with this script deserves it to be. Butler, who has not made a live-action movie to my liking in about a decade, finally hit it out of the park with this one. I agree. He gives a great performance. Maybe great is a strong word, but he gives a serviceable performance for what he needs to do. I don't think anybody involved with this project is taking it too seriously, but unlike the other White House takeover movie from that year, White House Down, which we mentioned, which was so over the top and ridiculous it was almost uncomfortable, this movie finds a good balance between the silliness and almost realistic situations and the action sequences. I will admit Aaron Eckhart isn't as charismatic a president as Jamie Foxx, but at least he's more believable in the role.
I'm going to give you that one.
So I give this one a B. I do think... Now, Joe, you like both of those films.
Correct.
I think White House Down is average at best. I believe I gave it a C. Justin, I know, was even lower than that.
C minus.
C minus. I do think this is the better of the two. Would you say that one's better or this one?
I like it when a movie that's kind of silly embraces the silliness. I would actually give White House Down.
White House Down, yeah, certainly does that.
White House Down, I'd give a B+.
Okay.
I think it was complete fun, where this movie tries to be kind of serious, and it's like, you know what, just kind of reel yourself back.
But here's the problem. White House Down thinks it's fun, and then will almost immediately, 10 minutes later, pretend to be a serious movie again.
I don't know. I thought the whole thing was kind of hilarious the whole time. So
I think that's, what I was sort of saying with that this movie finds a better balance between those two, because I do agree. And the big problem with White House Down is that Channing Tatum would have died about 7 or 8 different times. I mean, he gets blown up by a grenade not once but twice, and yet just walks right out.
And yet Vin Diesel spitting 20,000 times in the car, getting out, you're fine with that.
That's the reason I gave Fury 7 to C+, too.
Because, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. But Fast and Furious has no basis in reality whatsoever. And like Justin's saying, White House Down, there are spurts where it really thinks it's trying to be realistic and maybe not thought-provoking, but I think pulls away from the silliness a bit.
Like, the bad guys' motives are kind of serious, except they keep changing their motivation, so it gets even more confusing.
Well, that's another factor, too. I mean, the villain's James Woods. I mean...
I know.
I like
that explains everything. I stand corrected.
I mean, you kind of found me out.
No, he's not wrong.
Versus the... Yeah, better villain.
You're right.
And
you're right.
For me, in most stories, if I like a charismatic villain, that's always going to bump it up for me. But, I mean, you're right. I think that Olympus Has Fallen is a little more balanced and serious. But I think that's what made it a little less fun for me.
Okay.
So for me, they're about the same in enjoyability.
Right.
But I do agree that Channing Tatum should have died 1,000 times.
Yes, he should have. I like Fuqua, though.
I'm fine with it.
Justin has kind of a problem. Like, Training Day, I love.
Training Day, I think, is a good movie. I think Tears of the Sun, sorry, name was escaping me for a moment.
Yes.
I think it has its moments.
I know back in The Equalizer we wanted to talk about this. Yes, Tears of the Sun's good.
But the rest of his entire criteria, King Arthur, is just blah.
I thought The Equalizer was good
enough
for what he did. Yeah, I mean, I have problems with The Equalizer, but I thought he did a good enough job with what he had going for him.
I mean, I think it's very easy for him to kind of slide into being perceived as dull, but he has this very refined style where he takes these silly concepts and tries to make them take themselves more seriously.
He's trying to be fun, but he's not understanding that you got to have a decent story to go along with that, or else you're just basically one shade shy of Michael Bay.
Well, sometimes you work with the scripts you're given.
Do you not think that Olympus has an interesting story?
Not really. I mean,
the whole disgraced Secret Service guy.
Not really. I mean, like, everything I've seen this movie, I've seen done over several times better.
It is pretty standard action.
Yeah, but I can't say it's that different from a Die Hard, but it's not necessarily a bad story.
Well, I think also you have a good cast too. That always helps.
You have a good cast, but when you're working with Fuqua, who doesn't seem to ever want to get a good performance out of anyone unless you're doing Training Day, which was, I believe, his debut. I might be wrong about that. He just doesn't manage to get that same level of quality, which I think pulls down the movie severely.
I think in some of his films he's gotten some pretty good performances. Bruce Willis, Denzel Washington. I think it's fine. Gerard Butler. I mean, he can direct.
Yeah, listen, the guy got a good performance out of Gerard Butler, which I have rarely seen.
That's not often. So that's something.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say
give him that.
Completely true.
But Training Day caliber, no. Not even close.
No, but I'll give you Denzel in The Equalizer even.
I thought his performance
I think that's
was
a
good.
little generous, but
I thought Denzel did a good job in The Equalizer.
Once again, it's Denzel, but yeah, he was fine.
True.
He was fine in The Equalizer. Yeah, he was pretty good.
It falls into the Bruce Willis good not great department.
A good performance is still a good performance.
I've also found that Denzel has a tendency to be in has a tendency to give good performances even in really, really mediocre to bad movies. I don't like Flight. I will admit that he does do a very good job in Flight, though.
Yeah, true. I mean, so does John Goodman, though. It's not a good movie, but there's good performances in Flight. I don't think Denzel is the only one.
No, but my point is made.
That Denzel's a great actor? Yeah, of course.
We all agree. Solid
point, yes.
We all agree.
But I thought he was good in The Equalizer, and I I think that was one of his first, like, heavy action roles.
You don't consider Two Guns?
Well, as we talked about last week, yes, but that's also a comedic action role. I mean, Equalizer was pretty standard Liam Neeson Taken action style.
It's exactly what it was.
So, that was something a little different for him that Fuqua got, good result from.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think he's like the best director ever, but I've seen him do good stuff, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, the movies I've seen from him so far, I think, are at worst average.
Yeah.
All right, well, Justin, let's go to you for your old classic pick, and that was Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist.
After 3 straight weeks of being heartbroken, Nick, played by Michael Cera, is convinced by his friends to play a gig with their band. However, when he gets asked by Nora, played by Kat Dennings, to be her boyfriend for 5 minutes, a night-long journey sparks from losing friends, chasing the mysterious band Where's Fluffy, and romance. Now, for April, I wanted to run something a little more playful than my traditional fare this year. Obviously, Rocket Man wasn't doing it for either of you. I don't blame you. This, I just wanted to have some fun, and since we already talked about it, and Joe, you hadn't seen it, I thought, hey, why not? Let's have some fun this time around. It's ridiculous, but fortunately, what makes this movie work is the cast completely sells it, with charming performances and a few fun actor appearances from Jay Baruchel to Andy Samberg. Not everything works. I think the use of gum gets increasingly disgusting over the years, and whether or not the drunk girl wandering around by herself helplessly being played for laughs being funny is love it or hate it. I go back and forth. Some scenes are funny, some are a little uncomfortable. But the movie keeps a good pace. I think it has a very optimistic tone, which I like, and honestly, I do believe that Cera and Dennings do have legit chemistry. So I still stand by my A-.
Well, this is just about what every teen comedy romance strives to be and typically fails. I mean, I'll keep it short. The movie is clever, original, it has memorable characters, quotable lines, a great soundtrack, a really good story, and it also has a handful of gay characters, some of them even stereotypical ones, but makes them realistic, which I really appreciated. It's an A- for me as well. Joe?
Well, I think that this movie definitely has some good chemistry with Cera and Dennings for sure. Haven't really seen her in too much, other than Thor, which I didn't particularly like her in too much. But yeah, I think it has some originality. There's some real fun to it. I do think the story is a little bit disjointed, and I do think that it does kind of fall into the same areas that you'd expect a lot of these teen romance comedies to go into. I don't think it was completely that original, but I did feel like that it was genuine and it was fun, and I will leave it with a B+.
Okay.
I can accept that.
I think just some of the concepts of this movie are a little more original than some. Like, yeah, the whole mixtape thing's been done plenty of times, but, her music connection, with her father, and then the Jay Baruchel character trying to, like, push his CD on her, like, that was clever. Michael Cera having a yellow car that everybody thinks is a taxi, I thought that was pretty original. I think you're right. On the basis of just the teen romance story, maybe it's not that original, but I think it does strive for a lot of originality within the confines of the story.
There are a lot of quirks, for sure, that are original. You're right.
Yeah.
Some of the characters, some of the jokes and scenarios, but the story felt pretty basic to me.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. The basic story is there. How many different ways can you do a romance movie, I guess? But I do think there's a lot of originality within the characters.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the best thing the movie has going for it is these are characters that you generally end up liking and end up coming not really sure how to feel about, but end up loving.
I feel like once again we could have had more of them.
Yeah, but I
would agree.
For 90 minutes, it keeps moving. There isn't a moment that I feel like...
No, it doesn't drag, but I felt like some of the characters, like, for instance, her friend that kind of gets lost, I felt like she was almost just kind of the butt of the joke, and the gay band members, like, they were fun, they were memorable, they were likable, but they felt more like caricatures than characters. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a little more time could have been used to flesh them out and make the story seem more real to me.
But like Dan said, they sometimes come off as caricatures, but they also feel like real people, which I thought was interesting. And they also have a couple moments where there is some degree of development. Like, one of my favorite scenes is when Nora's in the back and Han Jr., I guess we'll call him.
Yeah. That's what he is to me.
is basically just explaining, like, the whole, like, oh, we like you, we don't want him to get back together with his ex.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're right. They feel like real people, but I still felt like they could have been fleshed out a little bit more. A little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, I would have liked to see more of them.
Yeah.
I can definitely agree with that sentiment. But I don't really think that there's a bad character in the bunch. You know? I don't I mean, even the ex-girlfriend, she's basic, but I like her dynamic with Kat Dennings. I like her dynamic with Michael Cera.
She's standard antagonist.
Yeah, I mean, she's standard antagonist, but she plays it well. I recognize the actress, but I don't really, like, know her from... I can't tell you where I know her from, but I liked her. I thought she did a good job.
Yeah.
Kat Dennings plays pretty much the same person, Joe, and everything.
I'll be honest.
Some more so than others, but...
I liked her in this movie, but I still found her a little bit grating.
Yeah, I can't watch Two Broke Girls. I watched an episode and a half, and I was like, I can't stomach this woman for too long.
I like the deadpan, like, the Deschanels and the plazas.
Yeah, the plaza. Mm-hmm.
You know, I usually go for that sort of thing, but for some reason with her, I don't... Something about her delivery has always been a little annoying to me.
I think her voice is a bit nasally.
Depends on the material. I've seen, like, her role in Thor both honestly kind of bother me. The fact that they gave her more to do in 2 was probably the biggest frustrating moment to me with that one.
I mean, like...
Because she's famous now.
I thought
it's like, oh, way to run completely on Two Broke Girls.
Thor was my first real experience with her, and I kind of liked some of her jokes, but it got old really fast because it's like, oh, I really don't care. And I'm like, oh, it's just like... Well, the problem is in that movie they used her pretty much for every product placement thing they had. It was just so obvious, but that's a whole other issue.
She's a broke girl. She needs the money.
That's why she's...
placement.
Yeah, I guess she is. But yeah, I did like her in this, though. I thought she was utilized pretty well.
And I do think they have good chemistry. This is sort of the era of good Michael Cera movies.
I haven't seen
really the only ones. Juno, Superbad, and this, and then nothing
Then came
else.
Youth in Revolt.
And then came, Youth in Revolt, Year One, Paper Heart, like all the bad, terrible Michael Cera movies.
Oh.
But this was like well, Scott Pilgrim was good too.
Okay.
That was probably a little bit after this, though, a year or two maybe.
That was probably the climax of his romantic comedy career.
That was the climax. All right, good pick though, Justin.
Thank you.
All right, so our final movie of the evening is our Oscar A to Z, as we always do. And we're really going through the A's. We have just maybe about 2 more months of these. And this is Atonement for this week. It's a 2007 film nominated for 7 Oscars, most of them in the artistic categories like costume design and art direction, and the one that it won, original score. It was also nominated, though, for adapted screenplay, supporting actress for Saoirse Ronan, and Best Picture. And it did win the Golden Globe for Best Drama that year. Mm-hmm. The movie starts in 1935 when we see a wealthy 13-year-old would-be writer named Bryony, played as a 13-year-old by Ronan, as a young adult by Romulo Garay, and in present day by Vanessa Redgrave. She falls in love with Robbie Turner, played by James McAvoy, the son of the family's housekeeper, but he's got his sights set on Bryony's older sister, Cecilia, played in 1935 by Keira Knightley. Unfortunately, when Bryony sees the two kissing and then some, she accuses Robbie of a horrible crime that he didn't commit, and he is arrested. Bryony spends her adult life trying to seek forgiveness for her actions. This film was on many critics' best of the year lists, including some that had it as the #1 best film of the year. Now, while I can't quite put it up there, I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it. It is a bit too long, especially in the second half when it loses its footing a bit, but the acting is top-notch from pretty much everyone. The scenery is gorgeous, and it is a gripping story. Now, the conclusion will be the dividing factor for many viewers, and one of our critics on this show has always been vocal in his distaste for it, but it did work for me. Is it satisfying from a storyline standpoint? Maybe not, but I think it's realistic in its approach, and who can deny Redgrave's ability to wring the proper emotions out of it? I give Atonement an A-. Justin, let's go to you. You are the critic that has been vocal both on and off the show about the ending of this film.
Guess we won't underplay my major love-hate relationship with this one. I do like director Joe Wright. He made one of my favorite action movies of the last 5 years, Hannah, which is a much better movie. And he honestly does know his way around a camera. I will never deny that. The guy is very, very talented. But Atonement's greatest flaw is it offers no reason to ever like the movie's obnoxious, frankly irritating heroine, Bryony, who starts off the movie as pretentious, rude, and frankly just a pain. But fortunately, like you said, Dan, everyone does manage to give a really, really good performance, even when the movie is starting to drag. But even during those sequences, you can really take in the imagery and see how the film's coming together. But unfortunately, it's that frustrating, very, very awkward conclusion that makes sense, but also feels completely inappropriate and frankly trying to demand sympathy when we can't have, where there is none. It just feels ridiculous to me. Though for its stylistic credits and acting, I'll give it some points. I leave Atonement with a B-.
Okay, Joe, how about for you?
I think it was actually a benefit to go into this movie with very low expectations, because I wasn't expecting to like it.
Yeah, and I had never seen it before, so all we really knew about it was that Justin didn't like it.
Yeah, I mean, that's all I knew, so
Yeah.
I was like, oh, it doesn't sound too good. But I actually was surprised to find the main story actually kind of engaging, and I actually thought that everybody did give a really good performance. I really thought the movie was also very well shot and edited. It kept things being mostly interesting, but I did feel the film was overly long, and some storylines do kind of drag. It is a little disjointed. There are some subplots which are either resolved too quickly or don't really get resolved with some of their characters. It just kind of makes it seem like it's distracting from the main storyline. The ending, I thought was okay, but I didn't think it was the strongest way they could have gone, honestly. Overall, though, I think it was well shot and well acted and engaging enough. I leave it with a B+.
Justin, was this on your top 5 for the movies that should not have been nominated for Best Picture? Or no?
I don't believe so.
Okay, because just knowing your distaste for it, it seems like it would be.
No, I mean, I feel like it earns its place for obviously acting and stylistic qualities.
Okay.
I don't necessarily like it, but I feel like it has its place.
Okay, that's fair. It's kind of how I feel about Benjamin Button.
There you go.
Not one of my favorite movies, but I get it, I guess. Yeah, I was very surprised when I was pulling up the synopsis for the film how many people just raved about this. Ebert had it at 4 stars, one of his favorites of the year. You know, Rolling Stone magazine, number 2 of the year. Time magazine, it was up there. I liked it, but I was shocked at just all of the accolades from the critics on this movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's got good things about it. It's just I have no real burning desire to ever watch it again.
Yeah, I mean, even with my A-, I don't think I would ever watch it again. It is too long, and, you know, as it goes, you know, kind of like you said, Joe, the second half, you know, we sort of intertwine some of these stories that either don't get fleshed out enough or, you know, don't conclusions. Yeah, they disappear. But for one go-around, I thought it was really good. It is obviously beautifully shot. I mean, all of those artistic awards that it got nominated for, I think, you know, that makes sense.
Well deserved.
Yeah, well deserved. The costumes are great. The cinematography is great, sure. And, you know, Ronan gives a great performance as supporting actress. I actually think it's one of Keira Knightley's best performances, too, though.
Yeah.
I thought she really knocked it out of the park here. And this is obviously a little earlier in her career. But she had done Pride and Prejudice by this point, because I believe it's the same director.
Same director, that's right.
He brought her on for Atonement because of that. But, I mean, look, the Bryony character, you know, at 13, yeah, she is a little bit of a brat. She's full of herself and pretentious, and you're not wrong about that. But she is 13. She's falling in love with this guy that is into her sister. You know, you can't fault her too much for, you know, I mean, you can fault her for what she did, I guess. But you can't fault her. Yeah, I know that. But you can't fault her for everything else that you said about her, you know. I mean, that wasn't necessarily referring to what she did, I don't think. I think you were referring to her personality. And she's a 13-year-old girl, I mean, that wants to be a writer and thinks she's better than she is, I guess.
I don't know. I'm kind of about 50-50 on both, to be honest with you. It's like, I understand you're an aspiring artist. You're obviously talented. You're writing plays at 13. But at the same time, I feel like there should at least be some reason to legitimately like this character, and there just isn't. She realizes what she did was wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, essentially just profiting off the ideas of what exactly is going on as a whole for your own personal redemption, which is just, no, you are a horrible human being.
Well, it depends on how you want to look at it, honestly. Because on one hand, you're right. In a way, trying to atone is kind of selfish for her own well-being. But if she really didn't care...
Is she atoning is my main argument.
She's trying to.
Yeah, she's attempting to.
She's trying to. And the idea is, if she was a really terrible person, she wouldn't have even bothered to atone and cared at all. So the fact that she realizes her mistake and tries to fix it, that's kind of what's supposed to be
likable. But does
likable.
she? Because the entire point of the climax is the scenes where she's apparently trying to atone never happened.
But what's actually happening in that scene is, in a way, her atoning by kind of putting it out there, So...
Yeah, it doesn't mean that she's not atoning
maybe not
a different way.
In the best way that it's implied that she should have originally, yeah, that would have been better, but she's trying to atone in a different way. I mean, at least she's trying to do something.
But I feel like there's a difference between atoning and writing fan fiction about atoning.
But she kind of confesses it, so it sort of invalidates
balances out, yeah.
It's like, I'm telling you just in case you're wondering, no, this is me just kind of...
embellishing
imagining what I would have liked to have done if I could, but to be fair, based upon what happens, she couldn't have...
Too late.
She couldn't have anyway, so, she was too late.
I mean, it's definitely, love it or hate it, I guess, on that ending. But I think it's hard to hold somebody's feet to the fire for something they did when they were 13 if once they grow up they regret it. I mean, maybe there's better methods to go about it, you would say, but I don't know. It worked for me in a realistic sense. All right, well, that is Atonement, and that is our show for this week. We'll be back next week. Lots of movies to review on next week's show, so we'll bring you that in full force. Joe, Merlin Channel, always new and exciting things there. Are you doing a Daredevil review on there, or have you already?
I'm actually going to upload some of my basic thoughts about it. We might be doing something a little more detailed if Justin and I can get our acting gear for that. But
we're shooting for it.
Very good.
We'll see how it goes down the line. But yeah, I put something up. Also some Dragon Ball Z stuff, some Pokemon, Digimon stuff. Just, some fun little discussions, getting them out when I can.
Very good. And I saw Gotham got renewed for a second season. Your favorite.
Well, I saw 2 episodes of the first season, and that was it. So
I know.
That's great that it got renewed. Glad people are liking it. I'm sure once they burn out all the villains, they'll realize they can't have Batman face any of the villains and be like, wow, there was really nowhere this could have gone. But hey, everybody's buying into it. It's a stupid business plan. Just make a Batman show. Everybody says it.
You got an issue with Gotham City Film Noir, all right?
That's all I got to say.
And that's the kind of stuff you get on the Merlin Channel.
That's pretty...
The Joe rants.
Yes.
They're my favorite part. All right. Well, for our listeners, if you have not yet subscribed to our channel on YouTube, go ahead and do that. And you can hit us up on Facebook as well. Film Fanatics with an exclamation point. We post our 5-word reviews there weekly leading up to that week's episode. And also on the Twitter, which is at Film Fanatics Pod. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you back here next week. Bye.